Hey gang, I was thinking the other day, I might come across as a bit of a steel snob when I'm doing all my steel testing and all that sort of business. I've had a couple of conversations that sort of made me want to make this video, and the subject of this video is what steel is the actual bare minimum for being a useful pocket knife steel? Like where does it, like how low do you go? And I think the often held assumption, which is probably quite fair with me, is that I'm going to say something like S30V, don't go any lower than S30V because you want to have at least 160 rope cuts, blah blah blah. I don't think that's true at all. The thing is, I got this rack knife, whatever they're called, and this is the LC200N steel, and it's $60. Now, first of all, my steel tests aren't the beginning and the end of every data point on steel at all. Certain knife steels, for example, would perform much better without the polished work sharp microconvex. I'm thinking M4 in particular. That would probably hold for a lot longer, and this is all probably an anecdotally, but there's a strong anecdotal case that performs a much better way with a ragged V-grind edge. It might even double what it got in my test if I tested it with that, but because I test everything with the same edge, it kind of means that all my results are how that knife performs with a polished microconvex rather than how it performs full stop. So anyway, just a thought on that, but it does sort of, I do feel like sort of saying, being a steel snob with your EDC knife steel is, it's practical to the point that, yeah, it's great to filter out your absolute junk. And I guess in this video I'll talk about where I would stop for an EDC knife and what the differences are perhaps from that and a woods knife or a sort of an outdoors knife even. So on the table here I'm looking at a whole scale of different steels through AUS 8, Victorinox's steel, 14C, 28N, CTS XHP, S35s and S30VNs, all the way up to your fancy flash CPM 20CV, third best in my testing. So really, I stopped really being bothered about having the best steel once I could sharpen. And that was the thing that happened for me was when I got my Tormek. And I could put really good edges on. Well, they're not the best edges. They're not like if you have an Edge Pro Apex system, you'll be able to put a really, micro mirrored super flash. You can see your reflection in the edge. So it doesn't do that, but it certainly puts on a really good serviceable edge. And once I did that, it really did lower my my perceived need for having a really long-lasting, crazy edge retention pocket knife steel. I do think pocket knife steels need to be a little bit more focused on edge retention than, say, your woods blades, your woodworking steels, because pocket knife steels are coming up against different things. In my experience, it's lots of cardboard, it's lots of plastic casings, and it's things like rope and synthetics. And synthetics are generally more fibrous because most synthetic things are made to be strong. When you're using a knife on wood is generally a ply type material, and even when you're digging in deep into wood and then chunking out, you're generally going with a ply to a point, more or less with a ply. So it matters less in your woodworking knives. I was having a conversation about the Finn Wolf. It's got a lower result in the Scandi steel tests, because I test my Scandi steels sometimes on my rope as well. And the viewer was completely right, and they're saying, who cuts 80 pieces of rope? Ever. No one does. That's absolutely just a parameter for my testing. And in fact, with a Scandi grind, it would take a lot of wood carving to get to that same level of edge ruination that cutting through 80 bits of twisted sisal rope would be. I mean, it's rugged and rough stuff. It really is. So really, I think, and the conclusion I've come to is, for me personally, as long as that edge isn't getting dull during the actual single job, or maybe even one or two jobs, then that's probably where I would draw the line. So from this point onwards, I'm probably going to be getting a bit anecdotal rather than basing my next few statements on my test results. So anecdotal is always less reliable than like any sort of science-based thing. It's just how people feel about stuff generally. And anecdotal, I wrote a bit of an article about this actually the other day. It's on Everyday Commentary. I might list it below. Anecdotal is only particularly valuable for everyone once a few people or a group of people are getting the same anecdotal evidences from their own experiences. But this is just my singular take. So I find that sort of anything less than this kind of, it's sort of syncing back up with my cutting test, anything that does less than the sort of 70 or so mark, I do find it becomes a little bit frustrating for an EDC pocket knife. Because I'm finding things like, say, for a perfect example was, we got a, what do we get delivered? A bed for my lad delivered, and so I had to cut up a massive bed box, and I did it with this Alma Ultralight Falcon. And I did it because it was the knife that I had on me, and because I think my wife might have been asleep. Something was keeping me from the rest of my knives. So I had the little knife that was in my pocket, which was the Ultralight Falcon, and so I went to work cutting up that rather fibrous cardboard box to get into my recycling bin. This knife stopped being good at that about halfway through the job, this AUS8 steel. It's still a very thin grind, so I could still finish the task with it because the thinness got me the rest of the way, but it was unpleasant cardboard cutting. You know, when it's all bunching up and balling up around it's fucking disaster. So, and that was it. And so I'd say AUS8 is below that line of what I want in an EDC pocket knife. Same with 8CR13 MOV. 440, your basic 440. These are just things in my experience which have been probably a little too low on the abrasive resistance with synthetics to really even have as anything but a sort of a fidget fun knife for in the pocket. There's some great knives that are in 8CR13 MOV. One of my favourite knives was the CRKT Swindle. Great knife, really fun to play with, fun to flip, but that still went soft crazy quick. It went soft, as I said, like during jobs. The knife at least needs to get to the end of a reasonable length of cardboard cutting for me to just be enjoying using that knife. Because as much as I can sharpen now, and as much as that did reduce me wanting, like when I couldn't sharpen, I wanted all my knives to be Maximet, so I never had to think about sharpening them. When I did, I could just send it to someone and they'd sharpen it for me. Now I can do it myself. That drew that requirement way down, but it's nevertheless there a little tiny bit because you don't want to have to stop what you're doing and resharpen your knife, or once you're finished, be like, holy crap, that is so dull. I won't even be able to use it to cut open the next freezer bag full of frozen veggies. Massive use of my EDC knives, by the way. So I have to go and sharpen it right now. That sucks. So that's kind of where it loses its luster a bit. I still love my Alma Falcon because I keep it as like a secondary knife almost, or it is even like a primary blade to because it's getting quite beaten up and quite rickety now, almost a primary blade to just poke and prod and do a few odd things here and there with, like, say, I'll use it to dig out Cedric had grass seed stuck in his ear, really nice little tip, and I used it to just pull them out, and they got a bit of Cedric blood on them and stuff. He was fine, by the way, but it's good for that sort of thing because it's a very fine, delicate little prodding instrument, but the steel is definitely lackluster. So I guess going back to my cutting tests, what number would I start at? Well, this stuff seems to go pretty well, and it goes to about 70 or so. I would say the 70 mark is what is minimum in my experience for a EDC pocket knife, because I can sharpen. If you can't sharpen, you may well want to climb that list a bit more. The Pole Boss 420HC is also pretty good. 4116 on the cold steel, CDS BD1. You can pretty much look up the list. All I'd really steer clear of is anything that goes below like 55 to 60-ish. I don't know, if I had to draw a line in the sand, I'd say 60. I'd say those steels, from my anecdotal experience, do feel like they go dull a lot quicker than the steels above that line. And even then, your VG10s and your 14C 28Ns and your N690s and stuff, they can all be heat treated to be a bit harder, but generally, and this is also general, all my stuff is general, because I'm not a scientist, I'm just a fellow who cuts lots of rope in his yard, and so I have some opinions based on that, and some opinions like you all about just how I've used my steels in the past. So that's all I've got, but just going from that, I'd probably draw a line at 60, and say anything below that is probably not that great for EDC. And everything above that is probably good to go, just relative to how much you like sharpening and how much you can sharpen. If you can sharpen heaps, then you know what? Get a good Pole Boss 420 HC knife, just sharpen it, you know, every second big job, and you'll be completely golden until a knife wears weight enough on this, which is what this AUS8 is starting to do. I wouldn't recommend the AUS8 anymore as a pocket knife. I don't think it's particularly good. And that's having used it a whole bunch with this knife for a pocket knife, for an everyday carry pocket knife. That gets me on to my next task about folding knives. Just talking about folding knives. Woods knives, field knives, stuff for carving and things like that. Matters so much less. My Gerber strong arm in 420HC, I use it a whole bunch. It's completely fine. My Mora Companion 12C27N, 12C27, not N, just 12C27. I use that to probably carve a whole walking stick. That was the last big job I used that for. That was a lot of carving like bark and wood and making a nice walking stick out of a pretty raggedy looking limb, and it's still super sharp. I know it's a scanty edge, but that's the thing. Your outdoor knives are going to be ground for outdoor purposes, so scanty edge or sort of thicker V grinds, and they're going to last a whole lot longer against wood than sort of AUS8 is going to last against rope and fibrous man-made. So whilst AUS8 I wouldn't suggest is very good for your EDC pocket knife, I would say it is totally fine for wood's work. One of the best wood steels is, in my opinion, Humble 420 HC on the Gerber Strongarm. It is tough and it holds an edge against everything but fibrous man-mades. Like, it's completely fine. Food and wood are not going to harm your edge too much. Only when you start hunting and actively rubbing the edge against bones are you going to really be dulling that edge too quickly. That's just my experience anyway. Again, anecdotal, probably worth a bit less to you than all of this stuff, but I've just been meaning to talk about this because if a steel scores low on my lists, it doesn't mean it's a bad steel for everything. It probably just means it's not a good steel for a job that will be cutting abrasives, which is generally your everyday carry pocket knife. Woods blades, yeah, people are chasing that 3V, 4V, all that sort of stuff, and I guess it's nice to have to literally never sharpen your wood cutting knife. Like, so Milana can make a Puko and M4. That must be amazing. John Neiman makes a 67 hardness ZDP wood carving knife. You would never have to sharpen that. It's just insane. But you barely have to sharpen your lower end steels when you're just using them against wood and stuff anyway. I mean, I think with your outdoor blades, you're generally going for toughness anyway, because you're going to be accidentally dropping them on rocks, and you don't want chips. You'd rather have dents than chips, or folds than chips, all that sort of stuff. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. So just because a knife steel has scored low in my test, and your favorite outdoor knife is made of that, it does not mean that either my test is wrong, or that you were wrong, or that I'm wrong. It just means that your outdoor purpose is probably not really even covered by my very much EDC focused testing. And there's some great outdoor steels that are lower end that you probably wouldn't even have a problem with if you had, you could have a Gerber strong arm for 2 or 3 months using it against the wood all the time, and you would never notice it being so dull that it wasn't working for you. It would take you a long time to get to that. Because how do I know that? Because I'm in that exact same boat right now. So I use the Gerber strong arm for a lot of stuff, just around the house, around the yard. It is a great knife to just put into that situation where you're not sure if it's going to come out okay. It's always come out okay. And the 420HC, it's still sharp enough. And sharp enough with wood is often good enough. Whereas, with their EDC knives, you always want to be cutting free-hanging paper and shaving arm hair and stuff like that. And it's just a bit different with your outside stuff, in my opinion. So, I don't know, I hope you've enjoyed this little chat. I don't do too many of these. I know it was a bit rambly, but I've had a few interesting discussions in the comments, and I thought I'd just do a video about it, because you might be interested, that's all. That's about all I have to say. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.